Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. I'm your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by my fellow host, Lance LaDuke, who almost died last month. Lance, how are you?
I feel nearly lifelike.
What happened?
I decided that, anybody can take, I teach college primarily. It's the thing I do the most. And we were done by the second week of December and didn't go back till, the second week of January. So I had like a month to kill. So I decided to get the flu 2 days before Christmas and have that for 5 days or so. And then develop pneumonia, which I had for a month, a little over a month. So that was fun.
How did you practice?
Actually, you know what? I thought about this would actually require a little more follow through than I'm probably capable of at this point. But it would be interesting. I played on Christmas Eve with the flu
For money?
at my church.
Did you play for money?
I haven't touched my horn since. Yeah, no, it's for church. I did it because I'm a nice guy.
I'm not having you on the entrepreneurial musician again.
Oh, but anyway, I thought it could be interesting to document the road back because I haven't played a note since Christmas Eve. But
this Christmas,
I tell you what, if there is demand for that, then I will put together either a couple of short videos or a blog post or something to uncover the frustration of what this process is going to be like. I agreed to do, this is apropos of nothing, but I'm doing a couple of
I'm
gigs.
just letting you run. It's all good, man.
And including a recital. I got to play a recital in June, and I haven't played recital in I don't know when. And so
I think Reagan was president.
Yeah. I think you might be right. So the going from zero to recital is going to be sort of an interesting process. I'm as fascinated as any of you might be.
That's good, man. I would pay to watch a stream of you struggling mightily in the practice room.
All right. Well, if there's demand for that, then reach out to us via one of our social media channels.
Speaking of which, stop talking right now. I have an announcement to make.
What?
Yeah. So Pedal Note Media, as a lot of you know, has already been on Twitter for a while. We have a Facebook page, but the Brass Junkies are making their Instagram and Twitter debuts.
No.
Yes, I'm not. I wouldn't joke about something like this. This is pretty serious.
Are we following anybody on Instagram?
We are currently following one person on Instagram, and that is Jens Lindemann.
Who's that?
And we are currently following one person on Twitter, and that is Jens Lindemann. So, and in fact, our handles for both Instagram and Twitter is Pray for Jens, the number 4. So at Pray for the number 4 Jens. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter and all that good stuff. So so tweet or comment on one of our Instagram posts if you would like to watch video of Lance getting really mad at his euphonium. So
with a beard, and I have a beard now too. So it's like even added. I don't know what. It's like a Houdini trick. Like chain him up, stick him in a box, lock the box, put him underwater. Wonder if he's going to drown.
Kind of career changes. You're growing a beard. Have you bought a sports car, or do I need to worry about you?
Oh, you should worry about me, but I'm bought a sports car.
You'll hear soon in our conversation with David Childs that Lance is talking about wearing adult diapers. It's you got to wait for it, but
Well, you should be pushing the Pray for Jens bling more. You can buy like a onesie for your child or a coffee mug or a sticker.
Yep, you can. You can also buy Brass Junkies logo coffee mug. I've got one of those.
T-shirt.
Yep, T-shirts, posters, stickers. Anyway, so Lance, from what I hear, there are 3 ways that people can help the podcast. What's the first way?
There's 3 ways that people can help the podcast.
That is what I had heard.
I heard that too. When you said it, Anyway, the first way that I want to talk about is a thing called Patreon, Patreon. We have some phenomenal, fantastic, supportive patrons at Patreon, and Patreon is a way where you can financially help us offset the costs of producing and uploading the show, hosting the show. You go to patreon.com, that's Patreon, and search for the Brass Junkies. And then you can subscribe at as little as $1, either per episode or per month. And if you want to sort of start or stop as your finances dictate, you can do that. If you want to contribute at a higher rate, you can do that. You can start and stop anytime. You can be a part of some behind-the-scenes things that we've got in the works for our fantastic patrons. We've got a guy named Russell Edders, for example, who suggested some questions to ask a guest, and we got those on actually in one of our most recent episodes with Alex Lappins. So you kind of get to see behind the scenes and be a part of a select group of folks who are kind of the super fans. So if you're a super fan, then head on over there and you can get some behind the scenes info as well as help us in a very, very tangible and specific way. Hey, Andrew, is there another way in which people can help us?
There is, but I wanted to point out that we've got a couple of very cool things that are rolling out very soon in terms of like having direct access to some of the people we interview for some of the patrons. So stay tuned. So speaking of the 3 ways you can help the podcast, the second way is to head over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. We're up to 44 ratings, which we're trying to crack 50. So please help us with that. That'll take just a second. We've got a whole bunch of awesome reviews. Alex Douglas said, "Great podcast. Hitz and LaDuke have a great series going. The guests get to be themselves, and we get to hear about the business of music and the backstory behind all these great players." And Andrew and Lance. No, I added that part. Really enjoying it, guys. So thank you, Alex, for taking the time to write that out. That really helps people to find the podcast when they search for it on iTunes. So we very much appreciate that. And Lance, what's the third way?
The third way is the easiest way. What we've found, or what I've found, I'm wondering if you've had the same experience. The people who are fans of this show are like way fans of this show.
Yes.
And that's awesome. It's very flattering, and I'm glad that you are appreciating what we're doing. And so if you want to do us a solid, you can just share it. Tell your friends. Force one of your buddies to sit down and listen to the thing and say, you got to check this thing out. So that's one of the best ways to help us is to just spread the word. So we're going to try and we're really trying to increase our listenership this year. We're starting our 3rd year of shows, and we're going to really try and add some new formats, different kinds of episodes, and then also increase the number of folks that we are able to reach. So your help is greatly appreciated.
And January actually was the biggest month for listenership for both the Brass Junkies and the Entrepreneurial Musician from Petaluma Media. Both of them were the biggest month we've ever had, and we're not even done yet. We still got a few days left in the month. So,
didn't you say how many countries have downloaded the show? Something like 50?
It was over 60 countries, I believe, is where we're at now of people who have listened, and that's all like countries that have downloaded episodes multiple times. It's not just like a one-off guy in Uganda who accidentally downloaded the JD Shaw episode and then quickly deleted it. So love
huge
JD.
Following in Uganda.
Yeah, exactly. So last announcement is that we want to thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing our hosting. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist model tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke model euphonium mouthpiece. Find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So we couldn't get any famous guests for this one, so we had to settle for David Childs. So he's just like one of the best. Some call him the best euphonium player in the world, not named Lance LaDuke, of course.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe we should have. He's
actually played in the last month.
We should. That's how fancy a career he has. He's played in the last month. Maybe we could have him give you Skype lessons as you try and go back. Good idea. Yeah, there you go. I bet he's
a guy he's one of the guys that his ego is disproportionate to his ability.
He's the nicest, sweetest human you could ever meet at all. You meet him and you'd think that he was like a low-level, computer programmer at some large office. And I mean that in terms of his humbleness. I mean, he's just, and he happens to be like this crazy world-renowned euphonium player who's only 35 years old and has accomplished more than most could ever dream of in a couple of lifetimes. So, other than the part where Lance talks about wearing diapers, it was a really pleasant conversation.
For me, it was warm.
And we go to all sorts of interesting places with the conversation, including the diapers. So, without further ado, let us get into our conversation with euphonium player extraordinaire, David Childs. And today we are joined by one of the finest euphonium soloists in the world. His name is David Childs. David, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
How are you, Lance?
I'm really, really good.
Hey, that was actually genuine.
Like really good.
He usually answers that.
Pneumonia for a month. So I'm happy to be able to speak and sit upright.
Oh, well, that's always a good start.
Yeah.
I set the bar just as high as I feel like I can manage.
So you have had a pretty mind-blowing career already, and you are not that old. Where was your last gig?
I was in Belfast last night, actually. I got back, flew in last night. I'm actually doing some research at Queen's University in Belfast into electroacoustic music, which is not something I've got a great deal of experience in. So I'm researching for a PhD there, so I have to go over now and again. But while I was over, I've got a friend that has a band, so I went to his band rehearsal and helped out there, and so mixing work with pleasure.
What do you hope to do with the electroacoustic thing? I'm fascinated because we're starting. I teach at Carnegie Mellon and Duquesne, but at Carnegie Mellon we've started an electroacoustic ensemble. And there's a euphonium player in there right now, and I keep trying to nudge them in that direction. So where are you going with it? I like this.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure yet. I'm going to see where the research takes me. But what we're experimenting with is putting various sensors on the instrument. So it's not just the standard reverb pedals and guitar effects. Pedals. We're putting sensors at the moment. We experiment with 4 sensors: a sliding sensor, 2 sliding sensors, which can affect anything from pitch to timbre, and also 2 kind of pressure sensors that could switch octaves or simply be a switch to add a certain pre-recorded sound. So you're not actually doing anything with your feet. Everything is on the instrument. Right. We're even experimenting with a sensor that, like on your iPhone, when you tilt it, it recognizes whether it's portrait or landscape, and the screen affects one way or the other. Well, with that same technology, we're trying to see if we can incorporate that to the instrument, so that when you move the instrument in a certain direction, the sound will change. So it's very new technology for me, and I'm hoping it will just expand the creative possibilities for the instrument in contemporary music. Completely different to the day-to-day stuff we all enjoy, but interesting research nonetheless.
I think so too. I think it's very, very, very fascinating. And you hit on the easiest place for people to start, which is the sensor, because if you look at things like robotics or, take robotics, for example. There's some interesting things that you could do, except robots are really expensive and really complex. And a sensor is pretty cheap overall. And it can do, like you said, well, your phone has how many different sensors in it? So if you start attaching them the way you talked about, or maybe you put them on the valves, or you put them, if they can measure velocity, or they can measure wind direction or speed or any of those things, then like you said, without doing elaborate stuff with your feet, or without having to do, one hand's doing one thing and one hand's doing the other, you get an opportunity to start to play in the playgrounds that lots of the other instrumentalists have gotten to play in, which is very cool. That's
right. Yeah, and I think it also opens up more opportunities for different kinds and styles of repertoire, with some real kind of wacky stuff I was working on with this guy yesterday, Professor Michael Alcorn. He's a really good composer, and he's into his electroacoustic music, and the sounds that he'd created for this particular piece we were looking at were all from a cardboard box. So it was ripping the box, scraping the box. So you had the sound file of all these sounds that all stemmed from this box. And the idea was that the euphonium was trying to match the idiom, if you like. So it was pretty new stuff for me. A bit of improvisation, which isn't my bag at all.
Right.
But you've always got to try and keep learning.
It's pushing us in all the right directions. Yeah. It's really fantastic. Are there other musicians, cool. Or do you have some models of other instruments? Like Zoe Keating is a cellist who does a lot of very interesting things, and Imogen Heap is another. Do you have artists like that you're sort of looking towards that have been an inspiration to you on this venture?
No, not particularly. Although the more I research, the more people I come across on YouTube and everything else, and it just blows your mind some of the things people are up to. I'm really in the early stages of it, and I'm just feeling my way along at the moment, just to see where it takes me.
I can't wait, because you get somebody with the kind of musical abilities that you have, and then you unleash a whole new arsenal of tools. And I can't wait to hear what's coming out of your horn in 5 years. It's going to be cool.
We'll see, maybe nothing will come from it. Who knows? But it's worth having a go. Yeah,
but you go for it, and then the kid who hears that thing, who's 17 or 14 right now, who grew up with all of this stuff. I mean, I'm a generation ahead of Andrew, who's a generation ahead of you. So, like, the kid who's listening to my kid just turned 15 yesterday.
Wow, and you're old. Holy mackerel.
Tell me. My daughter's 23, so you want to start talking.
What?
So,
wait, what?
Yeah. I'm going to have to take a nap in the middle of this episode. It's time for my pill.
That's
okay. But you're going to inspire some kid. There's going to be some young man or young woman out there who hears that thing and goes, "Oh, I've got it. I know exactly what to do." And they're informed by that stuff. They're just so comfortable with it. So kudos to you. I'm so glad you're doing it.
Well, hopefully. I mean, I don't know what it's like over your side of the pond, but here we are struggling to get kids to really take an interest in the low brass instruments in particular. Mm-hmm. So anything that they can relate to, whether if it funks up the instrument a little, or I mean that isn't necessarily going to be what I'm hoping to achieve. But the technology itself, if a younger guy comes along and thinks, well, I could do X, Y, and Z with this, and it inspires in that sense, then I'll be really happy, because we've got to try and get people playing these instruments.
Do you find that I find that students are less patient than they ever were with the notion that the music that they play in band is very different than the music that they listen to 22 hours a day, and they don't understand why they can't just play the kind of music that they listen to. And I wonder if this is a step towards bridging that gap and allowing young players to appreciate the work that goes into playing a brass instrument or whatever instrument. But then, yes, we can turn it into something that you would recognize as music instead of a thing you're supposed to learn because the concert's coming up or the contest or whatever.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. That's exactly right. I mean, in this country, the most popular instrument that kids take up is guitar, primarily electric guitar. They want to play in the band. They want to make those sounds that they hear on the radio. And if through this kind of technology you can have a bit of fun with that, making a euphonium sound like a guitar. People already do it, to be honest. You can just put a silent brass in an effects pedal, but if can create that awareness that you can have that kind of fun, as well as the traditional and rewarding classical aspect of any acoustic instrument, then that's a positive thing. But the society we live in today, there's so many other things that kids can be doing. Whether I've got a 5-year-old and he'll pick up my wife's iPhone. He knows how to get onto YouTube and find Thomas the Tank Engine or whatever it is. And it's so. I don't remember there being those kind of options and opportunities when I was a kid. You'd have your instrument, and that was something that would occupy you. But these days you play with something for 5 minutes, and onto the next thing, onto the next thing, onto another thing, and it's just the sign of the times, I think. So anything we can do to make the instruments more appealing, repertoire, technology, everything, I'm really into that.
Amen.
My son almost sent a text message to Gary Offenloch on my behalf yesterday. So, which was going to be all, like heart-eyed emojis. And Gary's an old teacher of mine, and we are quite close. But I don't regularly, text him hearts. So I think that would have confused him a little bit. So yeah, but I love the fact that when we interviewed Demondre earlier for the Brass Junkies. We just told him that we asked Demondre before him, Lance. This just got awkward, didn't it?
Well, we got to go. It was really good.
I got to tell you. I mean, I don't spend that much time in the US, but whenever I've heard Demondre, he's always blown me away. He's I think a lot of players in the US, but as far as euphonium playing goes, he's definitely one of my favorites. I've said to people before, and it's with no disrespect, but I could quite imagine him playing in a British brass band. He's got that big warmth of sound and the musicianship that he has as well. So it doesn't bother me at all that you had Demondre before me. He's an idol of mine.
There you go. So now we're going to have Demondre back on so that if he hears us, we can hear how big his head has gotten now that David Childs has called him an idol of his. So he's going to be insufferable. But which is a word that no one has ever used to describe Demondre. So I'm glad I could break some new ground here. Now, in his interview, he talked all about collaborating with a hip hop artist and producer, and I just think it's really cool that people like you and people like him have had and continue to have so much success doing the quote-unquote traditional thing, of just playing, standard rep with piano or with brass band or with wind ensemble, that neither one of you would need to change anything from that to be able to support yourselves doing that until you decide to not do it. So I think it's really awesome that people of your stature in the business are branching out and just and like you said who knows what's going to come of it, but I think that's even cooler. I mean, it's like just experimenting, remaining teachable, and exploring. And exploring doesn't always lead you somewhere that's well, it always leads you somewhere. It doesn't always lead you where you think you're going. It might lead you somewhere permanently. It might not. It might just inform what you're already doing. But I think it's awesome that you're experimenting with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it, and I'm finding new things about my playing as well. I think you've always got to be looking forward. If you're standing still, you're often going backwards. So I'm always looking for different routes. Speaking of collaborations, there's a really good percussionist over here, Evelyn Glennie, and we're looking at something together as well. So for any player, I think it's important to try and collaborate, find new music, new audiences, and
well, we tend to play with the same sorts of. You play with brass band people, and you play with other brass players, and you play. It's sort of that same. You're in this silo, and now all of a sudden you hook some sensors up and you run it through an effects processor. Well, now you can go play with the guitar players, and you can go play with the singers, and you can go play with people who make music purely electronically. They don't play, quote unquote, play an instrument. And it forces us to get out of our comfort zone in terms of how good our time is. What improvisation? How do we think about form? How do we think about sound? When you can take your euphonium and make it sound like anything, well, what do you want it to sound like? What is the quote unquote correct sound that should come out of your horn? And when it's infinite now, then you get to make very cool, interesting decisions.
Sure. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Although I do like the sound of the euphonium.
Well,
effect as well.
Yeah, I'm junkie for it.
I would too if the sound that was coming out of my euphonium was the sound that comes out of your euphonium.
I'm not sure about that.
That's the first time I saw you perform in person. That was actually the thing that struck me, was that you have just the most gorgeous sound, and it is, unless you're choosing to change it, it is the exact same sound when you're playing as loud as you possibly can, as softly as you possibly can, long notes, short notes, accented, non-accented, everything. Just the technical mastery that you exhibit, which I'm sure it doesn't feel like that on some days because it doesn't to anybody, but the technical mastery that you exhibit on the horn, it's like sometimes you hear a performer playing, and who it's like we're painting, and it's like that they don't quite have all of the colors at their disposal to be able to paint with, and but that was kind of my first impression was, and I'd heard you play on recordings and clips and all that many, many, many times, but being in the room with you for the first time, like my first impression was like this is like a painter that has like the biggest easel like ever. I mean, just the amount of homework that you've obviously done has then enabled you to I remember, and I couldn't tell you what the piece was, but I remember one phrase in particular where there was some ascending phrase that you played that went very high, but you put this like this perfectly executed diminuendo on this lick that went up to like a high M sharp or some ridiculously high note with this perfect release. And then I just thought like, well, I was like, what are the 7 things he just did that I need to work on to be able to execute that phrase? And I was blown away by the whole thing. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you approach, ultimately all that matters is the artistry and how you execute the phrase, but the colors on your palette. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you approach being able to handle all of your basics in such a wide range of situations?
Well, thanks very much. First of all, it's really kind of you saying. It means a lot coming from you. I suppose a lot of it's to do with your upbringing. I was really lucky to grow up in a house with someone who I believe to be the finest euphonium player there has been, and that's my father, Robert Childs. I was listening to world-class euphonium playing on a daily basis. And my uncle, Nicholas Childs, as well, that I'd go and listen to them both in concert. So I think subconsciously I had a certain sound in my head without really thinking about it too much. But my training and all my training's been with my dad. He gave me lessons when I was at school. In fact, he was the peripatetic brass teacher at my school. So he taught all the other kids brass, but I was one of the pupils as well. So he taught me. Then when I went to the Royal Northern College of Music, he was the specialist euphonium tutor there, so I continued my lessons. And I went and did a master's at the Welsh College of Music in Cardiff. He was the specialist euphonium tutor there, so I continued my lessons with him. So for all my life, my dad's been my teacher. And the one thing above all else that he always used to make sure I was aware of, he used to say, it doesn't matter how high you can play, how low, how fast, how loud, unless you make a good sound, nobody wants to hear you. And whatever I was doing, whether I was playing a study, an etude, or a showpiece, an air varia or a slow melody, everything would always come back to sound and phrasing, and it was just something that was the way that I was taught. So for you to ask me the question, how do I go about? It's quite a natural process for me. I try not to think about it too much. I think one of the things that's helped a great deal, other than the tuition and the way I was taught, is the idea that you should listen to as many different world-class musicians as you can, singers, violinists, cellists, clarinetists, not necessarily brass, although, I love listening to brass players as well, but you begin to hear the music without thinking too much about the technical aspect. So, for example, if you're on a top C and you start beginning to think about, right, well, I need to reduce the aperture size and but keep the air going and all the time do this, it becomes stifling, It can be too analytical. Whereas I listen to a singer and I think, well, that sounds lovely. I just want to try and do that. And you try and do it, and sometimes it'll work, and other times it won't, and then you have to find a way that it does work. But I'm not really much of an analytical, technical don't have that kind of approach with my playing. I look for the music I want to create, the sounds I want to create, the phrases I want to create, and I just keep experimenting until I can get it. I'm sure there's people out there that could tell me exactly what it is I'm doing. You know, whether it's I'm moving the tongue in this way or I'm doing this with the air. But I wouldn't begin to pretend that I have all those answers because I don't.
I wouldn't know what to do with that information if they gave it to me. Like, thank you. Oh, that's nice. I'm 5'10" as well.
The only thing separating me from playing like David Childs is information. I just need more data.
Mm-hmm.
No, the older you get and the more teaching you do, and I am doing a fair bit of teaching now. I teach at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama. You are forced to think about your playing a lot more, and I do give it a lot of thought, but I'm a strong believer in that you give someone too much information and it can hamper things rather than just let them find a way that works. You know as well as I do, you can look at some plays and everything's, before you hear them, everything says this isn't going to sound good, whether it's the embouchure or whether it's the posture or whatever. And then they can start playing, it completely surprises you and you think, wow, well, it works. Likewise, you can find someone with an embouchure that looks like a Porsche, you know, it's perfect, everything's there. And then they start playing and you think, oh dear, you know, you're doing everything right, but nothing's
Dude,
right.
I'm sitting right here. You can't talk about me without...
Lance, your embouchure totally looks like a Porsche.
But it drives like a Chevy.
Lance just grew a beard, and he was saying how many people were complimenting him at school on how good it looked, and I pointed out that they were just happy that something was covering his face.
Yeah. Wish I could argue.
Yeah, he did not put up. He was like, "Yeah, fair point."
So let's talk about what it's like to study with your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you must be asked that question a lot. So why shouldn't I?
no, I haven't been asked it in a while, but I think the assumption is that there's going to be arguments and disagreements and tantrums and all the rest of it. But for me, it wasn't like that at all. My lessons weren't very formal for a start. It wasn't. You know, I'd get home and my lesson would be at 5 p.m. till 6 p.m. or anything like that. I'd be practicing. My dad would come up and hear something and he'd say, have you tried doing this? You know, try this. So then he'd wander back out the room and let me carry on. So it was never, there was never any real arguments. And I think the fact that I was very much aware that he was at the top of the tree with regard to his playing. I knew it made sense to listen to what he had to say. I wasn't going to disagree with it. So the relationship was one of, from my perspective, of admiration first and foremost, and respect as well. So it was a good environment for learning. I think very, very different to the relationship he had with his father. His father, John Childs, my grandfather, was quite a taskmaster. My dad used to say the lessons that he had with him, it was rare that they didn't finish in tears. You know, wow. He was a hard man in that respect, and I think my dad didn't want to follow that same route, and so he didn't. So he very much let me find my own way a lot of the time, in a very clever and manipulative way. Looking back, but it worked, you know.
Well, how was the relationship between you and the other students? I mean, you're going into the lesson or a master class with your dad, and what was the environment like with the remainder of the studio?
You'd have to ask them. I mean, for me, my dad's dad. I called him Dad. I didn't call him Mr. Childs or anything like that. And it just felt normal. He'd always been a part of my music making. You know, I joined the local band where I lived when I was a kid. He was the conductor of the band. So going to college wasn't really. It was a little awkward. I suppose you're very conscious of the fact that people will have an opinion or feel that maybe you get a certain mark because your dad's on the staff or whatever. So I made sure I got my fair share of duff marks as well. But no, I mean, I wasn't I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I'm sure that it would have been more strange for those in the studio with me than it was for me.
Sure. Your dad and your uncle, I'm freaking old. So when I came up, there was the Falcone record, and that was it. That was the only thing I knew about. And this is, I came up, I graduated from high school in 1985.
Wow.
So in the, I guess, late 80s, early 90s, we started hearing about your dad and uncle, and starting to hear a little bit about Steve, and starting to hear a little about Dora Miura, and just like the wider world. And I remember hearing a recording of the Child's Bros, and just like it completely reset in my mind what was possible. There was just this expectation based on my experience and my teacher's experience and the Falcone record that this is what you can do. And then you hear what they did, and it just sort of completely rewrote the notion of what the instrument was capable of in my mind. And then I feel very, very fortunate in that, for two reasons. One is that when I was playing with River City Brass Band, Matthew Murchison and I played a number of those duos. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember if I did any of those with Steve. I think Steven and I did one or two of them with Brass Band of Battle Creek, but I was able to do more of the repertoire with River City and Matt, which was great fun. And just to sort of see how that thing that had blown my mind, what's it look like on paper? How's it come together? What's that feel like to play with another player like that and do all these sort of really cool, not only the cool acrobatic things, but then to try and match sound, match vibrato when you're trying to phrase the beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
But the when I got to meet your dad and uncle, it was at the Falcone, probably in the. When did you first go, by the way?
To Falcone?
Yeah.
I've never been.
You haven't? Okay. Well,
I think you could win. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, at this point, yeah. So the Childs Brothers came over in probably, I don't know, mid-90s, I'll say. And you judge all day, and there's master classes and whatever. And then at night, you do what you do. And so we were all at a place having liquid refreshment, and storytelling started. Now, you had to be, how old are you?
I'm 35.
35, okay. So you were born in what?
81.
81. Okay, so you were, so you were definitely playing by now. So your dad and uncle had said this was their, don't hold me to this particular thing, but I thought they said this was their third trip to the United States.
Right.
And so we were having quite a nice time, and they said they looked at each other like, should we tell the story or not? And then, why not? So they said that the first time, and I might have the order wrong, but bear with me. So they said the first time they got invited to the United States was by Paul Drosty, who taught at Ohio State University for a very long time and ran the brass band in Columbus. And he had them over and said, well, we'll have you play, and then we'll go out and have a good time after the concert. And so your dad and your uncle were like, fantastic, this sounds great. And so they go play the concert, and then they go get ice cream. And then Paul Drosty drops them off at their hotel.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so that was a good time. Oh, yeah, all right. Then they go home. So now it's, I don't know, however many years later, they get invited to come back to the United States by Brian Bowman.
Yeah.
Brian Bowman says, well, we'll do the concert, and then we'll go out and have a good time after the show. So, okay, cool. They go get ice cream, and he drops them off at the hotel. Americans are terrible. Their idea of a good time is ice cream. So they were very relieved that we had the kind of night that we did when we were at the Falcone. It's just fantastic.
They have shared that story before, yeah. And I think what confused them was that whether it was Brian or Paul, they said we'll go to the bar after the concert, and they were like, "Oh, great,
an ice cream bar,
ice cream
Sunday bar."
Ice cream bar.
But, yeah.
Well, I was glad that I got to be a part of broadening their opinions of Americans.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a brass thing, isn't it? Work hard, play hard, and they certainly did that.
Boy, our last trip over with
it was really great to meet them.
Yeah.
Our last trip over with Boston Brass, Lance, when we were in Scotland and England and Wales, that was there was no post-concert ice cream.
There was no post-concert ice cream.
It was like
those handlers. We had these two guys that went with, what were they, 10 days, something like that?
Yeah, they were a few days too long for their taste, but yeah, I think so. It was about 10 days. We had
these two guys from one of the dealers were kind of ushering us around. And, we'd do the day and then we'd do the night. And then we'd do the day and we'd do the night. And around the 5th or 6th day, the two guys were like, we're going to let you guys go do what you want to do. We can't hang anymore.
Oh, my goodness.
We broke them.
So we were talking before about the music that students listen to the other 22 hours a day. What kind of, and you touched on a little bit with vocalists and stuff, but what kind of music do you listen to when you're not in trying to make yourself better as a musician mode, when you're just throwing something on?
I don't know. Can you hear that music now? Is that music coming from my computer?
I don't know.
It's not coming through on the recording. So maybe it's in your. Okay. That's the key to playing like David Childs, is he literally has music just playing in his head all of the time.
I can hear something now.
Yeah. No, it's not coming through.
Okay, I need to stop that. Sorry about that.
No,
yeah. So, what kind of music do I listen to? Well, sorry, I've got to sort this out. Can you hear it?
Sure, now I hear something.
Yeah.
You smell burnt toast too?
Yeah. I wish I knew how to work my computer.
Where's that one that says DEL? It's for delicate. Just hit that one over and over again.
Delicate. Oh man.
I found. Okay, so my iTunes was open playing Remscapes by Thomas Doss. There's your answer. That's what I listened to.
Man, that dude had better give us some advertising money. Yeah.
We're going to get a cease and desist.
I listen to all kinds of stuff. If I'm in the car, I just put Classic FM on, and it plays all kinds of classical repertoire. My favorite composer that I like to listen to is Richard Strauss. I like the passion in his music, but then again, I could put on James Morrison, listen to him, or I could put on the Beatles or whatever. I listen to anything, and there's always something to be found in whatever it is you're listening to. But I'm not a huge fan of rap and hip hop and the like. But let's say everyone's got different tastes.
How's your year sort of divided up, or what all do you do? I guess it'd be a easier way to ask that question.
In terms of my career, what do I do?
Yeah, like how does the calendar of your year sort of work? How often are you on the road? How often are you teaching? How often are you recording? Those sorts of activities.
It depends what projects are on at the moment. I have a few different streams to my career. Right. I suppose when I was at college, a lot of the tuition was preparing you for what they describe as a portfolio career. These days it's rare to have someone that purely plays and realize, particularly on an instrument like the euphonium. I suppose it's a little different if you're on an orchestral instrument, a session player, just going into the studios and doing things. So for me, I was conscious that I'd probably need other things as well as my playing. So I have a publishing company, Prima Vista Music. I spend a little time on that, probably not as much as I should. I edit a magazine, the Brass Band World magazine. So I spend a little time on that. I teach at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama in Cardiff. We have no more than 12 students at any one time, 12 euphonium students, simply because there isn't the performance opportunities for more than that in the college. We have the wind band and a couple of brass bands and the orchestra, but many more players than that, and there's nothing for them to do. So I have 12 students there, and then the rest of my time is recitals, solo engagements, playing, and that could be doing a recital with the piano. In a week or two, I go out to Washington to play at the U.S. Army conference, and I'm doing a recital there, and then I'm doing a concerto out there as well with one of the bands. I'm not sure which one. So last week I was out in New York doing playing as part of the orchestra a piece for the TCINY Orchestra in Carnegie Hall. It was the US premiere of Carl Jenkins' cantata Memoria. So I do quite a bit of varied playing. I love playing with brass bands. That's what I grew up doing. So whenever the opportunity arises to do that, I usually jump at it. But yeah, in terms of how long am I on the road, it depends. In the next, I was in New York last week or the week before. I go to Washington next week. Then in mid-February, I'm in Philadelphia, and then I go back out to New York in April. But that's not normal. I'm not doing that every month. That's just the way things have worked out. But since I've had kids, I try not to be away for as long. I prefer to be away for a couple of days and then come home rather than do the long stints. I just find it a little too difficult, to be honest. But things change as you get older, I suppose. You know all about that.
Yeah.
You have to speak up, young man.
Yeah. Hey, Lance, how many times did you pee in the middle of the night last night?
In bed?
In bed. Oh dear. Hey, David, you remember this interview before it got awkward? Yeah, me too. So the traditional British brass band is something that is gaining in popularity here in the United States in terms of numbers and things. But I think there's a lot of people listening, at least here in the States, that don't know a lot about it. So can you tell us a little bit about it? I mean, you don't have to go into crazy detail about instrumentation and stuff, but if somebody were to say to you, "What's a British brass band?" what would your answer be?
Well, I suppose my answer would be our brass bands are about as popular as your wind bands or even marching bands. It's a big part of our culture. At the turn of as we went into the 1900s, there was 28,000 brass bands in the UK.
Wow,
that's a lot of brass bands for a small island. Every mill would have a band, every coal mine would have a band, every railway, every police station, every village, they'd all have a brass band. Now today, we don't have anywhere near that number, so we've probably got in the region of 500 brass bands in the UK. But they're separated in almost a sporting fashion. If you take soccer as an analogy, you have the Premier League, then the First Division Championship, Second Division, Third Division, Fourth Division. It's the same in this country with brass bands. We have the Premier League brass bands, which are in what we call the Championship section, and then they're in tiers below that, and they compete against each other. So the fourth section bands will have their own league, if you like. They'll go to a competition usually in about March time. There'll be a winner, and it'll be different winners in different regions throughout the UK. And then later in the year, they all meet at a national championship to decide which is the best fourth division band in the country. That band, if they're successful, then gets promoted up to the next division and do the same thing the following year, but in the third division. And then if they go up again, same thing. And so there's this ebb and flow all the time. And the bands are driven, rightly or wrongly, they're driven by this competitive aspect of music making. They're trying to improve their playing, not just so they can give a great concert on the weekend, but so they can go to the next contest and beat all their opposition. And I think that's actually been a really important factor for the British brass tradition, particularly brass band tradition. The players who have come from it, whether it be my father and his brother Nicholas, or Stephen Mead, or whoever it is, euphonium players look to. They grew up in that competitive environment, and I think it pushed playing on massively, and it continues to do so. It's interesting. Brass bands are getting more popular in the US, more popular in Japan, in Australia, in Norway, throughout Europe. But they're if you like, getting less popular in the UK. And I think that's probably just because we started with so many in the first place. But year on year, as there seems to be fewer bands in the UK, there seems to be more bands everywhere else in the world, which is a sobering thought in many respects.
Well, there you go. So I want to go back to a thing you said. You have 12 students in Cardiff, and I remember seeing. I'm starting to sound like I'm disgusting myself with the old man now, because I remember when I was in the Air Force Band, while Mike Colburn, who's now retired for heaven's sakes, before he even started conducting, he was just a dumb euphonium player in the Marine Band, and he and I having a discussion about whether you should have how many players you should let study the instrument at any time because of the restrictions, because of how many jobs there are. Yeah. And my position was and is that if they're talented, they'll figure out a way to have a career. And with things like going back to the beginning of our conversation and talking about the electroacoustic and the directions that we can go, where do those 12 students of yours go? And where are you hoping that the next generation of players venture? What sorts of music or what kinds of careers, or I don't know, what are your thoughts about where young players could go at this point?
Well, it's a really good question. And one that euphonium players, I encourage them to think about the first day they get to college. Where do you see yourself in 4 years' time? Some will say, I want to be traveling the world as a euphonium soloist like X, Y, and Z. Some will say, actually, I want to be a teacher. But I love my euphonium playing, so I want to get my degree here, and then I intend to go and do postgraduate study to become a qualified teacher, and then go into the classroom possibly. I find those students sometimes quite challenging to teach, because they know in the back of their minds that they don't really mind if they don't become an awesome player, because that isn't what they want to do in the first place. So that can be really quite challenging. But the pathway is there, the opportunity is there, so you have to respect it. Some players will come in and they want to pursue a career in the military, which is great. And others, it'll change. They'll have big dreams and big ideas at the start, and then by the time they get to the fourth year, maybe they've not developed in the way that they'd hope, and reality begins to kick in, and they think about, well, where am I going to be earning my living? And they start looking at things like arts management or education projects, or taking interest in completely different things. At the college, we try to support them with the best expertise possible in respect to those different outlets for their performance and for their education. But it's something that euphonium players have been doing for a long time, because there hasn't been a clean-cut route in the UK to become a professional euphonium player. Sure. You go into college as a trumpet player, and everything is built towards you coming out the other end and getting a job in an orchestra, or a trombone player, a tuba player, a French horn player. Euphonium's never had that, so we've always been looking. I know it's a little different in the US with so many military jobs, but not so in this country.
I would say that the ratio is probably about the same in terms of there's just there are more opportunities, but there's so many more players as well. The competition is probably the same.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. I should mention, though, for the first time ever in the last couple of years, the military, the army, have created 3 brass bands. So there are now professional opportunities for euphonium players, baritone players, and tenor horn players, which would never existed before. I'm not sure whether it's a cost-cutting exercise. You have a brass band instead of a wind band, it's less players. Right. But from a euphonium player's point of view, it's quite good. So a few of my students have taken that route already, and they're playing professionally, which is great for me to see, because it's not something I'm used to seeing. So it's fantastic.
Well, and we live in a world, you hit on it exactly. I mean, I think that was a fantastic answer. And the notion, we have given up a long time ago on the notion that there was a destination for us as euphonium players. Yes, you listed the couple of opportunities that there are, but by and large, our future was in our own hands, and how we define success was between our ears. And it is kind of fascinating to me to watch the students at Carnegie Mellon and Duquesne come to that realization that you and I have just sort of grown up knowing. There's no real jobs. I mean, if you were lucky enough to get one, that's great, and I was, and I'm grateful. But I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to, pick myself up by the bootstraps and find out what is my portfolio going to look like? How am I going to live indoors and eat food? And the other part of that is that I think the effort is worthwhile. One of the more talented students I have had is a guy named Hank Attaway, who was one of our producers at the beginning. And he just got a really fantastic gig as a development person for one of the major foundations in Washington, D.C. And I don't know that he would have had that if he hadn't gone through the experience of what's it like to face that horn in a small, 10 by 10 room day after day after day and analyze what isn't working. How do I address that? How do I fix it? How do I look in the mirror and admit that I'm not good at this thing and I need to be able to do that? And who cares if he doesn't end up being a professional euphonium player? He's going to be a success because he went through the process of that discovery and effort, I think.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. And there's no guarantees. You can work hard, you can get really good, but it doesn't always happen for you in the way that you hoped you would. But one thing's for sure, if you don't put the hard work in, you really you don't stand a chance. I was always taught you only get out what you put in, and so and that's not just practice. That's making opportunities for yourself, writing to letters to festivals, sending recordings out here, there, and everywhere, trying to get people to hear you. I mean, you can be the best. I say this to my students. You can practice in that small room, and you can be the best player that there is. But if no one knows you're there, then what's the use?
Amen.
It really isn't just about the playing. It's a lot of extra effort that people don't see. People say to me, so you must have an agent, you must have a manager, you must have this. No, I haven't. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes with the careers that we have that there's nothing to do with pushing that piece of metal against your face. And,
yes.
And if you're not prepared to put the legwork in with that, then the really nice bits, the playing the big concerts and playing the great music, that doesn't happen.
Sure. I talk about this all the time on my other podcast, The Entrepreneurial Musician. The good news is that all of the gatekeepers are gone. It wasn't that long ago that you needed to be chosen by a select number of people to be able to, someone would decide that, David, you get to make an album, Lance, you don't, she does, he doesn't, and those people are all gone. That goes for movies, for writing books, for recording albums, for making, so small movies, for YouTube, whatever. The bad news is that the gatekeepers have disappeared for everyone in Wales, for everyone in Japan, for everyone in Canada, in Brazil, all over the world. And so, the hard part is getting noticed, like you said, and by definition, if all you're doing is shedding in a practice room, which you can't minimize how important that is. You're not going to play the euphonium like David Childs if you don't spend. The reason that you play like you play has absolutely nothing to do with who your dad is. That's an exaggeration to say nothing, but you understand where I'm going with this. It doesn't have to do with who your uncle is. It has to do with how much work and how much smart work you have put in day after day, year after year, over a long period of time. So you got to do that, but then you have to get yourself out there. You have to approach, like you said, the festivals, the this, the that. I interviewed a guy named Peter Seymour, who's the bass player in a group called Project Trio, which is beatboxing, flute, cello, and bass. Not exactly like I don't think there used to be 28,000 beatboxing, flute, cello, and bass ensembles within the UK at any point. And yet, like, they decided they wanted to start playing shows. So he actually came up with a list of 3,000 venues that from scratch. He came up with this all on his own that they could possibly perform at, and he reached out via phone or email to all 3,000 of these, and he ended up getting 6 yeses and 2,994 either no's or no response at all. And he then said, you know what 6 yeses is called? And I said, what? And he said, a tour. And so, if you're willing to do all of that work to be able to play, the last page of pantomime that well, then you also should be willing to do that much work to hear 2,994 no's. And then all of a sudden, if you get that yes, and then you go and play your tail off and you're easy to work with, then you are suddenly, quote unquote, overnight, you're going to New York like you are, and you're going to Philly like you are, and you're coming here to DC like you are. It's so great that you're stressing that with your students so much, because it's so vitally important today. It
is. You can't be disheartened. I've had so many doors closed in my face over the years, but as soon as one opens, you forget about all that disappointing stuff, and you're enthused with the next thing, and you just got to get on with it. People, you can write many emails and send recordings off and do all the rest of it, and it can be demoralizing. Nothing, no response, and then all of a sudden, it just takes one letter from someone or one opportunity from somewhere, and it becomes worth it. That's just the way it is.
Every person anyone listening to this who's aspiring to, to do what any of us have done, every person that you have heard of had their first break. I mean, everybody at some point you got a yes when either before you weren't asking or before it was all no. So that's important to remember. Well, we're just about out of time with you. You're a big football fan, correct?
I am. Manchester United. They're playing this afternoon, actually. So, 1 hour till kickoff.
Oh, good. I was about to say, I'm guessing that you've got the game paused. Then, if I love how life revolves around that, every weekend over there, and sometimes more with the Champions League and everything. It's you never quite know when it's coming. So, I'm assuming that you're a fan of the Welsh national team as well.
Yeah, they did great in the summer, didn't they?
I was just about to say, that was on a lot of Americans probably don't know or don't understand how big a deal that was. But Wales beat Belgium, and didn't just beat them. What, it was like 3-1, right? To reach the semis of the Euro 2016. Where were you when? Where did you watch that game?
In Halifax, Nova Scotia. Of
course.
Yeah, I was in Canada doing the North American Brass Band summer school. And so I was watching it there. But there was a few Welsh people there. For me, I have mixed loyalties really, because I was born in England. I was born in Grimethorpe. Have you seen that film, Brastoff?
Oh yeah,
I have not. I'd need to. It's on my list.
Okay, well, Lance knows what I'm talking about. But this is a mining village, Grimethorpe, in the north of England, and that's where I was born at the time. My father was playing Euphonium with the Grimethorpe Colliery Band. But I've lived in Wales for the last 15 years, and my family are Welsh. So I like to see England do well, I like to see Wales do well, which is entirely different to most Welsh people. Right. Welsh people love to see England fail. There's
been a lot of that since the 60s. Yeah.
Well, so part of the glory for Wales wasn't just doing brilliantly themselves, but it was seeing England do so terribly. They
did not exactly have the Euro that they were hoping to have. Yeah.
You could say.
Yeah, Belgium is great. So I know a lot of Americans were happy for Wales, just because any time that a team of that size can take down a power like Belgium, it makes for a good story. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So speaking of a not good story, our dear friend Jens Lindemann, how was that for an awkward segue, Lance? Was that pretty good?
See, I thought you'd go for the Canadian segue.
Oh, see that? That was some low-hanging fruit.
You got to go back to segues.
We're going to edit that out. No, we won't. So speaking of Halifax, our dear Canadian brother Jens Lindemann, as I'm sure you are aware, over in Wales, has been going through some pretty serious chop problems, and so we were wondering if, just as a favor to us, since he just means so much to Lance and I if you could maybe offer him some advice on the chop problems that he's going through and in this very difficult time in his life.
Yeah, well, I had heard about that, and my thoughts do go out to Jens. It's difficult. It's a difficult one, isn't it? I suppose one something that he could try is the hot and cold therapy, which I know works quite well for many brass players. So maybe go to the ice cream bar and take an ice cream, get the lips feeling quite numb, and then if you can get some tea, English tea, preferably English breakfast tea, and take a sip of the hot water, just give it a few seconds, and then go back to the ice cream, back to the tea. Maybe do this about 6 or 7 times, and then pick up the trumpet. And I think you'll be surprised with the results.
I like it. Any particular flavor of ice cream? It doesn't matter, probably.
Preferably strawberry.
Strawberry.
Tea is always the answer with you people, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
What's the problem? I know tea is the answer. I just didn't hear the question. Well, that's
David.
that's pretty good.
What should we promote for you? What can we put in the links of the show notes? We'll put your site for sure, and a link to the Brass Band World and Prima Vista.
When's the show coming out?
Oh, that's a fantastic question.
Yeah, we're not exactly
actually,
sure.
you know when the show's coming out is Tuesday.
It might be 2 weeks from Tuesday or Tuesday. Yeah, we're not sure.
Well, because
Tuesday is when I arrive in Washington.
Perfect.
Oh, there you go.
The North American Brass Band Summer School. It would be quite nice if you're able to mention that. That's for anyone that wants to come along and study with myself, with my dad. Also play in the Nova Scotia International Tattoo as part of the band. So I mean, how this thing works during the day, once the show's up and running, there's loads of free time. So we have a brass band, a British style brass band. Get some of the boys over from Corey Band, the principal cornet Tom Houchin and a few others, and we teach them about British brass bands and play various bits of music, and then in the evening they go and play in the show. So that's taking place the end of June, beginning of July, and the website is nabs.com, NABBSS, North American Brass Bands Summer School.com. So if anyone wants to sign up for that, then they can come and spend 10 days or so in Halifax and do some playing, do some socializing and everything else.
Great.
Ice cream bar.
Yeah. Strawberry ice cream. Breakfast tea.
I need to start adopting the XYZ. I think that sounds very cool. I'm going to start taking that from now on.
And how did you...
XYZ is just sort of lame. XYZ's got a little pepper in it. I like that.
And how did you say timbre before? It was way cooler than we do.
Oh, timbre.
Timbre. Yeah, see, we say timbre. Yeah, we can make Americans can make any potentially beautiful word as ugly as possible without changing the letters. So, yeah, we're really good at that. Maybe that's the key, actually. You have to talk like David does in order to play the euphonium like he does. It has nothing to do with hard work. You just need to have a famous dad and talk beautifully like he does, and you'll be famous. So
beautiful vocal timbre.
Hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, exactly. So just go acquire a famous father.
Absolutely.
Actually, if you could get an e-course of teaching people how to acquire a famous father, you could clean up. That's some good passive income right there. You can make money while you sleep. So, all right. Is there anything else, Lance?
No.
It's time for his nap.
Well, and he's had to go to the bathroom, I'm sure, for the last 45 minutes. So I'm sure he.
I took care.
Oh.
Wear yellow pants from now on.
It took us a full 57 and a half minutes, but we did finally get David to put his head down on his desk. That was like right at the buzzer. He put his head down on his desk. So, and I don't think there's any better way to end it. That is going to do it for another episode of The Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to help support the podcast in order to make more episodes like this one possible, please visit pedalnotemedia.com/donate for more details. Also, be sure to check out our latest recording, The Brass Recording Project, at brassrecordingproject.com. The Brass Junkies is produced by Austin Boyer and Buddy Deschler of the Fredericksburg Brass Institute. Executive producers are Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.